Hi everyone and welcome to our next webinar, which is how to kickstart a career in digital. I'm Natalie and I'm going to be the host for today. So if you have any questions throughout, please just drop them into the YouTube chat, or also you can email in hello@clicky.co.uk if you have any questions following the webinar. So to begin with, let's just have a short introduction to who our guest speakers are today. So, do you want to kick it off, Shannon?
Yeah, so I'm Shannon. I'm a PPC executive at Clicky. I've been working here about 5 years now.
I'm Hollie. I'm the content and digital PR specialist. I've been here for about 2 years.
I'm Rhian and I'm head of creative at Clicky, and I'm coming up to my 6th year at Clicky now.
I'm Bryony and I'm one of the front-end developers at Clicky, and I've been here for just shy of 3 years now.
So the reason we're doing this webinar today is because it is National Careers Week, but also we've got International Women's Day that's coming up on Sunday. So at Clicky, we're really lucky that 55% of our Clicky staff are female. At Clicky, 47% of our managers are female as well, so that's higher than the UK average of 37%. And then 60% of our senior management team is female as well, so we just wanted to celebrate that really. To give a shout out to our Clicky ladies, and so we're just going to move on now to the questions. So thank you for those who've sent some questions in over social over the past few weeks. We've included those as well as a few extras. So let's get started. So first of all, how did your career in digital begin? So Rhian, do you want to kick things off?
A few years ago now, well, first of all, I went to university and studied graphic communication. I always was interested in graphic design and building that side of things. But then left university and discovered that it was quite difficult to get a job in that. After a long time of applying and going through that process, I met a really lovely manager called George, and he was the creative manager at a company called boohoo.com, a fashion retailer in Manchester, and basically he kind of took me under his wing and showed me the delights of digital design. It's not something I was ever interested in learning before, but from going through that and working at an online brand, I learned that you could be much more flexible in design if you were working in digital, and there was a whole new space of animation and different flexibility that was available to me. So that's kind of where my career began.
Shannon?
Yeah, so I've got, I suppose, a similar background. So I went to university and did marketing with advertising. And during my second year, it was a requirement to do some sort of placement, whether that was in-house or at an agency. So I applied to a few, and luckily Clicky accepted, so they got in touch and offered me a 2-week placement. And then after my placement, they then offered me a part-time job during my studies, which was really good. So throughout university, I was learning digital from kind of all of the team members at Clicky, and then after graduation I was then offered a full-time job, so I've worked my way from being kind of a digital assistant at Clicky to a PPC exec, which is what I am now.
Hollie?
Mine's a little bit different. I did my degree in documentary film, but my career in digital didn't start until a little bit later. I had an editorial career at a very traditional stockbroker in London, and while I had a lot of experience with language and publication, where I was within the research team, it was when social media started picking up. Smartphones at the time were sort of fairly new, but then they started to develop and apps like Instagram started to come out. And so we started incorporating Twitter as part of sharing research updates. And it kind of went from there, from working in-house using Twitter to share that kind of information, and sharing company updates on LinkedIn to raise the stockbroker profile. And then as we took more of that work on, it then started to evolve into digital with the website. I worked on a number of website projects. So it's kind of started from social and grown from there really, and then evolved into PR.
And then Bryony.
So I've got a degree from Lancaster University, and as part of my undergraduate master's degree, I had to do a work placement, and I did a work placement at a digital agency based in Lancaster. And then ever since then, it's just inspired me to follow a career in digital. So once I graduated, I pursued digital agencies, and then I've just worked in digital agencies ever since.
Fab. Okay, so this is quite an interesting question. Do you need a degree for a career in digital? So I think all of us do have a degree, but what's your thoughts on, do you think it's actually a necessity?
I would say no. I just mentioned my degree, but I think, there's always a debate of whether you go to university these days or you get the experience. And I think as long as you can demonstrate your skills and interests, for me, before I started working more into digital, I tried to involve myself in that as much as possible. I even had a little bit of a career break when I left London, and I worked in a pub, but while I was working in that pub, I helped run their social media. So I always wanted to make sure that I kept up to date with everything and I could demonstrate once I applied for a role where I've continued that interest as well.
I'd agree. Even though I've got a degree and it's an irrelevant subject, I don't think you need one. I find degrees quite outdated, especially digital's so fast-paced and so quick that I find a degree is kind of outdated by the time you come to do the degree. A lot of my degree was actually non-digital. It was kind of more traditional offline marketing and advertising. I think we had one module in digital, and then once I came to Clicky on my placement, I realised that even that module was outdated versus what I suppose agencies put into practice. So I don't think it's essential for a degree now.
Okay, so what are the differences from working in-house to an agency? So Rhian, do you want to?
Yeah, so it's quite a tricky question. I suppose they're both really, really different. Working both sides can be challenging. A lot of the time I get feedback that in-house is a slower pace of life. I wouldn't tend to agree with that. I think they both come with the same pressures. The main difference for me as a designer, I suppose, is that when I've previously worked in-house, obviously you're stuck with that one brand, and you're limited in terms of those brand guidelines, the look and feel of how they want to present themselves. Whereas at Clicky, I get to work on such a diverse range of clients. So for me, I get a lot more creative freedom, and I get to work with lots of different exciting brands and meet lots of different people. And that's what really excites me about working in an agency as opposed to in-house. But I don't want to put anyone off because I had a brilliant time working in-house too.
Hollie, you've experienced both as well.
Yeah, I think, like you said, Rhian, there's benefits to both. For me, I've certainly found going to agency, it's multitasking to a completely different level. While in-house is busy as well, you've got to get used to changing your focus quite frequently in agency. I think naturally in any role you have to, jump on tasks which require something urgently, but obviously within an agency your focus is completely switch industry to industry. You in essence have to become an expert in so many different sectors. So if you like that kind of challenge, agency is brilliant because you get so much exposure to those kind of industries. Whereas if you really want to fully immerse yourself into one brand, and if you're working in-house and you absolutely believe in that brand, then that's also perfect as well.
Okay, so which companies need digital marketing? So Shannon?
I'd argue all companies. I don't know anyone that goes and picks up the yellow pages to find anything these days. Everything is online, so if you're not online, then how are people going to find you? Even your local kind of florists, or I was recently looking for some dog boarding, so some kennels. The first place I looked was online, so I think it's just important that everyone's got an online presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, something for us at the time, while I was working in the finance industry was because it was such a traditional industry. It was really interesting as we were sort of picking up more of the digital work, obviously explaining to the board and other key members why it is a benefit. And even though there's still that like face-to-face relationship building definitely on the sales side, and there are still equally benefits to digital as well, even if that's simply down to PR for a company and building your brand presence online and liaising with journalists on Twitter, for example. There was like a good balance between the traditional side as well as the digital side of marketing.
I think it's a lot about trust as well in that case. Like, you might be more traditional as a business and do a lot more things face to face and offline, but ultimately people are, like Shannon said, always going to check your online presence, and it's important that that does reflect your brand and how you want to be perceived. So if you've not got a presence online, that is going to make people question whether you're able to produce the service that you are offering.
Have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome, Bryony?
I mean, like, on a level I have. I always struggle with thinking people are interested in what I have to say, and that they're going to benefit from what I say. So I always struggle with things like this, where people think that I'm going to have an interesting response. I'm like, oh, okay.
I definitely say I have. I mean, career change, one example, because I worked in a very corporate environment to then working in a more casual environment, which is exactly why, I wanted the change. But then, when I was surrounded by other people who had worked in the industry for many more years than me, or, like you already said, like had degrees specifically in marketing and knew more about different agencies, I thought, oh my gosh, am I, like, being honest, able to do this? But obviously I was hired, so there was like to think that my employer saw the potential, and look at where I am now. So I think it obviously is a completely natural thing, and I mean, imposter syndrome is a word that we hear a lot more now. There are moments where I think it can affect everybody, but overall, I think if you look at what you've been able to deliver, and take a little bit of reflection to see what you've achieved or the kind of projects you're working on now compared to several years ago, that's something that I definitely do to try and push those imposter syndrome thoughts out of my mind.
Yeah, I think as someone that is quite senior at Clicky, I probably deal with this on a daily basis. I think the higher up you go in your role, the more you're expected, or you feel that you're expected to always know the answer, or always do what's best, or always get it right. But obviously just remembering that you are a human, and it doesn't stop you from making the wrong decision, or it doesn't stop you from not knowing the answer. And sometimes it's okay to be honest about that, and people tend to respect it when you are.
Yeah, I think that's something definitely at Clicky in particular, that they encourage, communicating those thoughts as well, and never being afraid to ask a question, which again, I think is, you might think you're not right to ask that question, and that's imposter syndrome kicking in, but actually you're completely entitled to ask any question.
So how do you each ensure that you continue to develop and reach your career aspirations? Shannon, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I personally think it's important to have some sort of career plan in place. I'm not saying it has to map out kind of every day of your career for the rest of your life, but just having a vision of where you want to get to, even if there's bumps in the road, or there's a change of tack, maybe you want to sidestep and move into a different role, that's fine. It's just having that initial plan of the next step you want to get to.
I think for me it's very about continuous learning and knowledge sharing, both internally at Clicky and externally, attending events, hearing what other people have to say. There's such a wealth of knowledge out there, and you're always going to be learning something new. So it's making sure you're open to that and trying to experience it as well.
I follow other agencies and brands and follow their sort of individuals within my specialism to see what they're sharing, what kind of work they're producing. Even from where they're going to a talk or where they're speaking, for me it's using them as aspiration to develop my own skills, and also like communicating. I think for me, like I said earlier, like speaking up if there's something that I'd like to learn or if there's something that I'd like to do more, then I always make sure I share that with my manager as well.
I think for me, it's about pushing myself out of my comfort zone. It's quite easy to carry on and just stay in my little bubble and be quite content with that. But to be able to really make sure that I'm progressing, I think feeling that level of uncomfort now and again is worth the risk, and it pays off, and it always kind of strives you on to lead to the next thing that's going to push you out of your comfort zone. And usually for me that means public speaking or doing something that's a bit scary.
Why should someone decide to take a career in digital marketing? Bryony?
For me, it's all about the variety and the pace. Every day can be different at Clicky. You're working on different brands, different projects. Every day is interesting and you don't know what the next thing could bring. So for me, that's really interesting, and that's one of the reasons that I love it the most.
I'd say it's like super flexible in terms of an industry. There's so many different kind of personalities and abilities. Even just looking at Clicky, we've got our creative team with Rhian and the designers, and then we've got a strategy and insights team who are hugely technical, but both kind of work together. So I think there's kind of real scope for kind of whatever your interest is or your personality type. There's probably something that will suit you in digital.
Yeah, I always wanted to have sort of writing as part of my career, and just from my degree, like that taught me how to put things together from scratch. Something like with digital, we all have our own different specialisms, but ultimately we're all working together to drive the end goal for a brand, which is for me like one of the most satisfying things, because you can sort of be involved in each different step to see the final impact on a company, which is ace.
I think for me it's all about digital, so it's constantly evolving and changing. So it's keeping you on your toes all the time. You can't rely, as Shannon said, like degrees are outdated, but also things that we've learnt 6 months ago are also outdated. So it really challenges you daily to be on top of what's going on in the industry. And if I think about design specifically, so maybe 6-12 months ago, there wasn't maybe such thing as a UX team, but now it's at the core of everything we do. So for me, it's really exciting that yes, I might be in this job role now, but in 6 months' time, that could be totally different, and it could be with a different specialism altogether. So yeah, really exciting to just have so many options.
So I suppose we've touched on it a bit already, but how much has the industry changed since you started out? Rhian?
I think I'm going to show my age by talking about this. But I think the big thing for me is when I started at Boohoo, their social team was about 2 people, whereas now it's obviously a huge part of their strategy, and that's obviously not unique to them. And just seeing how that in itself has grown kind of excites me that, yeah, things are obviously expanding, which is great.
I think for me, the change with social in particular, how people are processing content, attention spans, it's all things like that which impact content massively. And even for SEO, the number of algorithms, we're having to react so frequently. So, where before people, thought they could put content up and then that would be it. No, it's an ongoing thing.
It's a similar story for PPC as well. 5 years ago when I first kind of started at Clicky, it was all kind of very manual. The PPC team kind of had to do all the jobs, and now Google have machine learning and all these different tools and platforms that we can use, which makes obviously our lives easier, but also helps us achieve better results for clients as well.
For development, the way we work and the processes have just changed so much. I've seen so much change even whilst I've been in development, but also the devices that we work on and what we're targeting, it's just all changing, and it's just really exciting to see what's coming next and what our next challenge is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think relating to what you just said, Bryony, in terms of the targeting side of things, so when I first started, even at Clicky, so 5-6 years ago, it was enough to create a website that just kind of look good, and that would be enough for you to be an industry leader or performing the best in your industry, whereas now we have to put a lot of work into the strategy behind that and taking the time to really understand our users and create a design that takes all that intelligence on board and really appeals to the audience that we are trying to target.
So, what would be your best piece of advice for those looking to get started in a similar role? So, Bryony, if we start with you, because I suppose your role as a female in development is quite rare.
Yeah, so it's not very often that I've worked with another female on the development team. That doesn't happen very often for me. So my first piece of advice is don't be afraid to be the only female in the room. It will happen, but your voice still counts. You matter. You can do just as good a job. It's all good. The other piece of advice would be that you're never too old to reskill and change your career path. I know so many people in development specifically that have no longer decided that their career path's right for them, and they've reskilled, taught themselves to code, and they've now got a career in development that can last them for the rest of their career.
I would say don't be afraid to pick up the phone and introduce yourself. That's how I basically ended up working at Clicky. In particular, obviously, like said about my career change, I was looking into different places to work. I'd never lived in Chester before, and I came across Clicky. And for me, I called up. I think I may have sent an email, but I picked up the phone and I spoke to our head of culture, Claire. And I can still remember the conversation. I was walking along Bournemouth Beach and speaking to her about myself, what kind of opportunity I was looking for. And it's something, it's how I got back in touch with Clicky after I worked at my previous agency. And I think as long as you have a clear idea of what you want to get out of an opportunity as well, and you know what you can offer, that's the sort of basic way of starting a conversation and being upfront and honest and also confident about what you can do.
So I've got two pieces really. One is don't rely on other people to learn for you. I think you should always be continually developing yourself. If you don't know something, go and pick up a book, go and read Google, whatever it is you have to do to kind of upskill yourself in that area. But I suppose don't rely on other people to teach you, because you can often be let down in that way. And I suppose the second piece of advice, similar to what Bryony said, don't be afraid to, sidestep or retrain. I was originally an account manager, decided that I didn't enjoy it very much, and therefore decided to retrain in PPC. I still had all my account management skills were still relevant for my PPC role. It was just picking up those technical skills, and it's probably the best thing I've ever done for my career.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's also being aware of what transferable skills you have. There's so much overlap. And like you said as well, it's never too late to redevelop your skills.
No, I think also being open to opportunities is a big one. Just putting yourself out there, even in ways you don't expect. I know someone that got a job offer by updating their Instagram bio. It's all a possibility, so just don't be afraid to go after what you want, really.
Yeah, I think my advice would be similar in the sense of putting yourself out there. Whilst digital is a huge industry, often you find that people are connected and they often know who's who. So attending events and making sure you're speaking to the right people, even just on a social basis and things like that really help. But yeah, most importantly is just being nice to people. No one's going to hire you if you're difficult to work with or if you're rude. And I know that's the basics of every role really, but when I think about when we're hiring at Clicky, obviously the technical side of things and making sure you're really good at your job is really, really important to me. But second to that, or just as equal to that, probably is making sure that you're going to fit in with our team. I want to work with people that inspire me, and that's something that's really important.
Okay, we have had a question through, so this one's probably for you, Bryony. Where and how can you learn to code, and what did you use, or what would you recommend?
So for myself, a lot of my coding experience is from a university degree, and some of the modules that I did in that were digital specific. However, there are so many programs out there that you can get on board with that help women or anyone retrain, get into development. They'll help you do placements and encourage you to get a job out of that. Alternatively, online, there's coding clubs. There's just a wealth of knowledge and experience out there and willing to help. Code Nation, for example. There's so much.
Okay, thank you for listening, everyone. If you do have any other further questions following the webinar, like I said, please